All right, starting day number 6 now. Now we're going to talk about how do we actually take those trig ratios that you guys just learned that came from SOHCAHTOA, and how are we going to turn those into something that we can actually get some numbers from to solve some triangles. Now, the solving part of this is definitely going to involve using a calculator today. So make sure that you've got a calculator from either your teacher or from your phone. You're probably going to make sure you need to find the sine, the cosine, and the tangent buttons on that calculator so that you can actually press them correctly, all right? Now, what I want you to remember is that everything that we do in trig is all based on perspective. Now, remember, if I'm standing over here in point C, that would be called the opposite side. This would be called the adjacent side, and this one would be the hypotenuse. But it would change if you were standing in a different spot. Now, those formulas that you're going to be basically using today are going to be from this category right here, these 3 ideas. Now, I left a lot of space because the formulas are the following. Sine of the angle. Now, I'm going to adjust this just a little bit. I'm going to say the angle that you're standing on. In this case, it would be the angle C, because that's where we got it pointed out. But that would be equivalent to the opposite over the hypotenuse, because that's what SO stands for. Cosine of the angle, and that's where the angle goes, is right here, is going to end up being the adjacent over the hypotenuse, because that's CAH, C-A-H, and this one's S-O-H. And TOA means that I'm going to be using tangent of whatever angle I'm at is going to equal the opposite over the adjacent, okay? Now, I'm going to show you how we're going to solve each one of those things. But before we can actually solve some stuff, we got to make sure that all our calculators are in the same mode. They all have to be in the same modality, and that mode has to be in degree mode. Now, if you're using a graphing calculator like I've got right here, this graphing calculator has a mode button, and that mode button allows you to change it from degrees and radians. Now, this one right here, I want it to be in degrees so that I get all the right questions, and it'll end up being in degrees now from this point forward. Now, if you don't have that on your phone, you might actually have a DRG button, and it'll say D and then R, then in G. If you push it, it'll change, and you want it to be in D, which is the degree mode of your calculator. If not, you might have to go to the settings on your calculator and find out how to get those degree modes. Now, to ensure that our calculators are all in the same mode, we're going to use the calculator to approximate some of these questions. And what they are is when they use the word sine or they use the word tangent, they're going to use these 3 trig buttons that are listed on your calculator. They've got sine, cosine, and tangent. Now, if you don't have those on your calculator, they might be hidden underneath a trig key, or if you've got using your phone, you want to definitely turn it sideways so that you can see sine, cosine, and tangent. Now, I'm going to plug this guy in just exactly the way that it's written right here, which is sine of 30, and I'm going to press the enter, and I would get this number of 0.5. Now, on my graphing calculator, it types it in exactly the way that it's seen. On some calculators, you might have to do it backwards. And what I mean by backwards is on your phones, they might be backwards. You have to put the 30 in first, and then you push the sine key. So figure out which one yours is. Is yours a forward calculator, or is it a backwards calculator? Okay, the next one. So if you are in the right degree mode, you should have gotten 0.5. If you do the tangent one that's here, tangent of 5 divided by 4, you should get the same number that I get here, which is 0.028. It's 0.022. So we're going to go at least 3 decimal places. I think that's what they want. They want the nearest thousandth. So 0.022, and I rounded the 8 to the next one up. Cosine of 77 should look like this. That would be 0.225. 0.225, because that's in degrees. And then the last one should be sine of 5/14. And you have to be able to put these guys in as fractions too as well. That's not a big deal. You have to do it backwards. You do the 5/14 first and then push the sine key. And that answer would be 0.006. Now, what your calculator is doing right here is it's looking at the sine idea and it's thinking about an opposite and a hypotenuse combination of two numbers that would cause the answer to come out for a 30-degree angle. And it has it built inside of it to help you figure out those answers. Now, to solve using your calculator, you're going to have to learn how to use the formulas that were up above. And here's what the basic plan is going to be. Number one, you have to put the dot in, all right? What I mean by the dot is that whenever you do a question, you have to decide where you're going to stand. And in this case, the angle that they give you is the place where you're going to stand. This is where you're going to put your big fat dot. I'm standing there with a dunce cap on, I guess. Number two, you're going to want some labels. Okay, to be good at this, you got to make sure you label the things that you actually can see. Well, from that perspective, over here would be the opposite side. And the one across from the 90-degree angle happens to be the hypotenuse side. Now, as soon as you get some labels in there, you can do step 3, and that is pick a ratio. Now, what I mean by pick a ratio is that you only have 3 ratios to choose from. That's sine, that's cosine, or tangent, or better yet, so, and ka, and toa. That's the only ones that you really get to choose from. And when you look at the question that you're dealing with, it'll basically tell you which ones you've got. I have an O for opposite, and I have an H for hypotenuse. So the correct one to choose would be the only one that has an O and an H in it, which is sine. So once you choose the ratio, step 4 is that you fill it up. You fill out the formula. So I'm going to put out fill formula. Okay? Now the formula that you have to choose happens to be the formula that says sine of the angle. Now you're going to put your angle in here, whatever it happens to be, in this case it's A, is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Now I actually have some numbers and some letters I can put in this. Sine of 51 degrees is equal to the opposite, which is x, and the hypotenuse, which is 15. Now, it's just like filling out any other formula. There happens to be 3 locations you can put numbers. You can put them in as the ratio on one side and as the angle on the other. Now, I'm going to put as my 5th rule right here, you have to decide what case this is so that you can decide how you're going to solve it. Okay? So you're like, what case am I dealing with, and how do I solve that case? If it turns out that the x is in the top of the actual sine, cosine, or tangent, I refer to these as a case 1. Okay, well, this is case 1, where the x is up above. Now, how do you actually solve a case 1? Well, it's really actually pretty easy. You just want to get rid of the 15, and the way you get rid of the 15 is that you move it to the front and you multiply it out here in the front. So I'd end up rewriting this whole question as 15 times sine of 51 is equal to x. It just moves to the front-hand side. That's because the x is in the top. Now, number 6, how do you finish this? You grab your calculator and you solve it. All right, now I had to actually come back and cut the video at this spot because my calculator went into radian mode and I got all the wrong answers. So it can happen. Make sure that your calculator's in the right mode, and we're going to go with 15 sine of 51, and we're going to plug that right directly into our calculator, and we're going to get an answer of 11.66 is what we should get on this particular deal. So 11.66, hold on, I'll move my calculator over here for a second. 11.66 Let me make sure this writes. Is what you should get for x. Now, be aware, on some calculators, you actually have to do the sine part first and then multiply by the 15. That's okay. It's just on these, they just type exactly the way they are in, and you get the answer that you're searching for. Now, that answer that you just found happened to be this side over here, and that's what the trig is all about. There's no 30, 60, 90 stuff about it, just the trig function that you've got to figure out. Now, the key is to continue to keep practicing with how to plug those things in. Follow the rules. Make a dot. Dot. There it is, right there. That's where I'm going to stand because this is where the angle's at. Labels. This would be the adjacent, and this would be the hypotenuse. And the only thing that uses the adjacent and the hypotenuse is CAH. C-A-H. Now, if I'm using the adjacent and the hypotenuse, which for cosine, that would be cosine of the angle I'm standing at, 38 degrees, is equal to y over 14, because that's the adjacent and the hypotenuse. And now I'm down to that next deal. What case am I sitting on? I'm sitting on a case 1, and it's solved exactly like the one that came before this one. You move the 14 to the front, and you plug it in your calculator. 14 times cosine of 38 is equal to y. So recognize your cases and make sure that things are plugged in the right way. Now I'm checking my mode again. Yep, still in degrees. That's awesome. And I'd be like 14 cosine of 38 degrees. And in that case, I get 11.03. So y equals 11.03, and that answer is what you get for y. Okay? Now, these steps right here are key to making sure that you do this correctly. All right? So be adamant about it. Make sure that you're doing things the correct way, and it shouldn't make any problems for you. All right? Here we go again. We'll try it again. 7. Put a dot. There you go. There's your dot. Opposite and adjacent. Labels. Awesome. Pick a ratio that works for this. I've got an O and an A, so it must be a TOA, because it's got an O and an A in it. Tangent of 55 is equal to Z over 8, because it's opposite over adjacent. Still, what case? Still in the top. I haven't changed that part yet. Case 1s. All right, I know how to do that. Move the 8 to the front and solve it. 8 times tangent of 55 is equal to Z. Now, what kind of number are we going to get here? Come on, trusty calculator. I always give my calculator a name, like an old lady name. This is Mildred. All right, let's see what Mildred has to say. Tangent of 55 is going to be multiplied by 8, and the answer is 14.43 or 11.43. 11.43 is what Z turns out to be. Okay? You need to be practicing these on your own calculator so you know how to make it work. Now, up until now, we've seen nothing but case 1, case 1, case 1, where the variable is in the top. It is really super important to do the first couple of steps to make sure you pick the right ratio and you get the right case. Big old fat dot in number 8, and that would be the adjacent. This would be the hypotenuse. And what uses A's and H's? That would be CAH. So cosine of 51 equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse, 8 over y. Uh-oh, it's changed. Now, here is where it's on the bottom of the question. This is a case 2. Now, how are we going to do a case 2? Well, it turned out in case 1, you just move the stuff to the front, and you end up doing multiplication. It makes sense that if it's on the bottom, it's probably going to be a division problem. The case 2 that I'm going to talk about is what I call the switch case. You're going to have to switch some things, and what you're going to do is you're going to switch this y with all of this cosine 51. They are basically going to trade places. And you'll end up with y is equal to 8 divided by cosine of 51. They just flip-flop each other. Now I could show the algebra here. It basically, the y could still move to the front like the other guy. Then you would divide, do some proportions, but it'll still turn out to be this concept. Now, what are you going to get as an answer? Checking my mode. Ooh, I'm in degrees. That's good. Instead of doing multiplication, I'm going to do 8 divided by cosine of 51, and then I'm going to press my enter key. Now, sometimes on some calculators, you have to push enter twice, so just be careful here until you get the 12.7 that you were supposed to get. 12.7 should be the answer that comes up on that calculator, so check it out. 12.71, we'll go 2 decimal places. All right, now the key to this is just ensuring, do you follow those steps? If you set it up right, you can't go wrong, all right? You definitely are not going to go wrong. Some other things that you might consider as you go down this road is about what is your answer actually saying. If your answer is across from a big angle, or it's next to a big angle, or across from the 90, let's just say that. If it was across from the 90, it better be the biggest side. So make sure your answers seem to make sense. If it's across from a big angle, big side. If it's across from the 90, it better be the biggest side. If it's across from the smallest one, it's going to be the smallest side. Okay, now some other things you can do is compare largest sides and shortest sides. Largest sides are definitely going to be across from the 90-degree angle. So which one's the largest one? AC is the largest one, for sure, because it's across from the biggest angle. The one that's going to be the shortest side would definitely be the one that's across from the smallest angle. Now, you don't know this one, but you can find it. Triangles add up to 180, and that would make this angle 41 degrees or 51 degrees. I think it's going to be 51 degrees, okay? This would definitely be the shortest side, or BC, okay? Now, what they're asking you to do in this question is to solve for the missing piece. Well, if you're going to solve for this missing guy over here, you actually have to follow the rules. Big dot, this is where I'm going to stand. That is the opposite. This is the hypotenuse. What uses opposite and hypotenuse? That's so. That would be sine of 39 is equal to x over 15. This is a case 1. And in case 1, this guy just moves out here to the front, and I'd plug it in as 15 times sine of 39. Let's see what I end up getting here. Check my mode. Yep, we're doing good there. 15 times sine of 39, and you get an answer of 9.43. So x in this case is 9.43 units. Okay, pretty straightforward, huh? If you follow the steps, you will be golden, all right? So make sure that you do. Now, some things that you want to make sure you don't forget is that old stuff, it still applies. So if you're stuck on something, what could you rely on? Maybe you could rely on Pythag, or maybe you could rely on 30-60-90, or even could be 45-90s are still out there, as well as SOHCAHTOA. This is all-encompassing. You got to be able to use one in the right scenario that you're in. Now, if I look at this question right here, you're like, ooh, I want to stand over here at the 43-degree angle, but the sides that I don't have any numbers on that triangle. I could possibly use one of these extra ideas to help me figure out how to find one of these sides, and specifically this side right here. I could use Pythagorean theorem to come up with this length on the right triangle, and then on the left one, use it to help me find x later on down the road. So it is sometimes you got to do a couple steps. 11 squared plus x squared. I'm not going to use x because we're already using x. 11 squared plus, we'll call this guy y. Y squared is equal to 21 squared. Now let's see what kind of numbers we get here. 21 squared is a pretty good sized number. That's 441. And 11 squared is 121. And if I subtract that guy over on the other side, this is just Pythagorean stuff that I've done in the past. 121 away from that number is 320. And then I would take the square root of 320. Oops, I don't know what it's doing there. Second. Square root. 320. And not 330. 320. Boy, oh boy. And that answer would be 17.88. I don't want to catch a couple more. 89. All right. Now, I've got an answer for this side right here. Now I'm going to go to my SOHCAHTOA abilities. Be like, okay, I'm going to stand at the dot. This would be the opposite. This would be the hypotenuse. And that would be a sine question. Sine of 43 is equal to 17.89, because that's what the opposite is, over x. And all right, we got a case 2. Look at that. It's a case 2, the switch case. And if I was going to switch these two, it would become x equals 17.89 divided by sine of 43. Now let's see what kind of number that comes out to be. And some cool things is if you're on your calculator and you are keeping an old number, you'd be like, hey, I just want to take that number and divide it by sine of 43. Don't be a clear button pusher. That's a bad idea. And you'd get an answer of 26.23. So the answer is 26.23 is how long that side is. Trig is powerful. It can do really amazing things. If you just learn the rules and learn the solving techniques, you could be a very powerful mathematician. Give it a shot.